Once again, we return to news from Abuja, where day 3 of the 31st Nigerian Economic Summit has ended and where it turned its gaze beyond national borders toward the wider African continent. The conversations revolved around regional integration and collaboration, which participants describe as the new currency for global relevance and shared prosperity. Now, we're going to take a quick conversation here with an economist, Faith Iyoha, who will be helping us recap, as we said from before. Faith, it's good to have you back here. Thank you for rejoining us. It was bad network from before, but I had asked from before. It's been a very, it's been 3 days at the summit, but today, the last day, what was the key message that was being told by delegates?
Okay. Very much for having me, Mancini. So one of the things that we had today was with a presentation of an holistic tool to measure the health and the debt burden of African countries. And then we talked about the Pan-African expansion as a gateway to economic development, and also how do we tackle the barriers for African countries to collaborate. So in that section, we look at the diverse regulatory and policy environment and the need to synergize this across the African continent. We also look at the titans on the move. We look at Africans, multinationals ranging from Flutterways to Guinness and MTN. And one of the major take from that section was that there is need to synergize policy and regulatory environment. There is need to remove barriers to African countries trading together. And it is important to leverage the AfCFTA to drive economic prosperity and inclusion in the African continent. We look at economic transformation of the MICTA countries, that is Mexico, Indonesia, we have Turkey, and those are the countries I could really measure from the top of my head. So we look at those countries and what are the lessons we can draw from the MICTA countries. And then one of the major lessons was that it has been done in other countries, and then we can do it in Nigeria. We can grow in a prosperous and inclusive way. And one thing we need to do is to synergize, is to leverage AfCFTA, is to also make sure that the regulatory environment is predictable. And then businesses can come in to make sure that, they are able to do business well and then to improve or come together to develop the country. So we also look at a session around the clarion call to action. And one of the take-home was that it is important to make sure that we are able to transition from where we are now as Nigeria and as Africa, and we are able to measure impact and outcome come NES32.
So, Faith, this wouldn't be the first time that stakeholders have actually touched on these issues that were raised at NES31. So I'm wondering, for you, what makes this year's NES different, a different summit from the previous ones?
Oh, thank you very much. So specifically what makes it a different summit is the fact that this was not only about Nigeria, it was about Africa, it was about rising together. It was about how we can leverage the AfCFTA to become a very strong continent in terms of economic growth development, and how to make sure that this growth is transmitted into the lives and livelihood of citizens, and to make sure that we are able to reduce the level of poverty that has been projected to be hosted within the African continent. So for me, one of the things that really stood out for me is the fact that we are thinking about coming together as African and using our resources to make sure we become one of the global titans in the near future.
So how exactly do you expect government and its partners in the private sector to work in achieving a common interest? Say, for example, let's talk about alleviating poverty.
Okay, so it is important to collaborate. This cannot be done by the government. First, it is important to make sure that infrastructures are provided, taxes are used efficiently and effectively to provide those infrastructure that could drive industrialization in the near future. And then it is also important to collaborate in terms of human capital development, health, and education. How do we make sure that we are producing the skills that we want in the industry? And how do we make sure that we are plugging the gap in our health system so that the health system is able to provide health care for the populace that we produce? Also, one of the things that could be done with the handshake between the private and the public sector is the fact that whenever there is need to come up with a reform, there is always need to make sure that they are providing for the vulnerable or providing a cushion for the vulnerable, those that the reform will impact in the near future or those that will bear the burden of the reform. So it is also important from my own perspective for the government to not just always come up with a reform. There's need to communicate this reform even in advance. So one of the session talked about ability to project the future from 5 years, and that's why investors can come, because they can already see what is going to happen in the next 5 years, and they are sure it is going to happen, and then they can plan within that space. So it is important for that to also happen within Nigeria and Africa as a whole.
Faith wants to say thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.